Welcome to today's Explainer. I'm putting on my financial analyst hat for this one because we're unpacking what is arguably the most pressing question in the entire market right now. Is the artificial intelligence industry a massive, sustainable boom, or are we sitting inside a highly inflated bubble just waiting to burst? I mean, billions upon billions are being poured into data centers just to make these magical AI models work. But at the exact same time, we're seeing headlines pointing out that 95% of companies don't actually report any profit increases connected to AI. So let's dive into this. We're going to evaluate the gritty reality versus the massive hype, and we're going to do it using hard data. Here is our roadmap for today. 1. Corporate reality. 2. The evaluation framework. 3. Narratives and pure plays. 4. Infrastructure debt. 5. The novice investor. And finally, 6. A fragile ecosystem. All right, let's jump right into section 1, corporate reality, the integration struggle. To really understand if AI is in a bubble, we have to look past those magical promises of a single savior technology that just fixes everything. We need to look at what major companies are actually deploying right now. And what they are deploying is called Agentic AI. Take BMW, for example. They aren't using AI to magically design and build entire cars from scratch. Instead, they use small, highly specific AI agents to manage and track about 250,000 pieces of production equipment scattered all across their supply chain. We're talking things like presses, welding machines, and lifting cranes. And BMW's use case brilliantly illustrates why enterprise AI is so complex. You see, it's not a single giant brain doing all the work. It's a multi-agent integration process. First, a task agent actually asks a supplier to perform an inventory check. The supplier then scans a QR code which captures metadata and geolocation. Then, a completely separate validation agent checks if that data looks correct. If it doesn't, it alerts a human. Finally, if everything gets a green light, a documentation agent steps in and files the paperwork. It requires incredibly strict rules so that each agent is rigidly fixed to just one single step of the process. So, the absolutely crucial point here is that AI in the corporate world is actually a business problem, not a technology problem. You can't just plug ChatGPT into your company and expect magic. You literally have to remap and completely alter your existing business processes. For BMW, just to kickstart this one specific agentic AI inventory workflow, it took them a year and a half. That long integration timeline is vastly underestimated in today's hype cycle. And all of this corporate friction builds into a massive reliability problem. We constantly hear about these AI models just crushing benchmark tests, right? Passing math Olympiads, acing bar exams. But look at Devin. Devin was this highly publicized AI software engineer. Despite getting incredible benchmark scores, when they actually tested Devin in real-world coding environments, it was only successful at 3 out of the 20 tasks it was built for. It turns out, studying for a standardized test doesn't necessarily mean an AI can actually generalize those skills in the real world. And when these models fail, they fail hard. This leads to what the industry is calling AI slop. This is when an AI does such a wildly bad job that humans actually end up spending more time fixing the errors than if they had just done the work themselves from the start. Even the very top models today have failure rates hovering around 3 to 10%. Stanford researchers tested legal AIs like Do Not Pay, which famously claimed it could automate anything a human lawyer does, and they found severe hallucinations. In some cases, the AI actually reversed the meaning of real laws, which, is definitely not a great strategy for a lawyer. To put that into perspective, if a technology has a 10% failure rate, imagine applying that to airlines. That would mean 1.7 million plane crashes a year. That looming danger is exactly why corporate adoption is so incredibly difficult. Moving on to section 2. The evaluation framework, historical bubbles. So are these high failure rates just normal growing pains, or are they glaring red flags of a financial bubble? To answer that, we turn to a really phenomenal historical analysis by David Kirsch and Brent Goldfarb. They analyzed 58 different historical technological innovations. We're talking everything from electricity to the 1840s railroads, the 1920s radio boom, all the way to the 1990s dot-com era. Their goal was simple: figure out why some technologies created massive, devastating financial bubbles while others didn't. And this is the matrix they developed. They found 4 specific, recurring pillars that historically increase the likelihood of a bubble forming around a new technology. First, a strong narrative. Second, uncertainty around how to actually monetize it. Third, the presence of pure-play companies that literally do nothing else. And fourth, a huge influx of novice investors. So, let's take these 4 indicators and systematically evaluate today's AI market against them. Section 3. Narratives and pure plays. Stories versus reality. There is a staggering claim floating around the tech industry right now. AI will be smarter than all of humanity collectively by 2030. Because we've been completely surrounded by Hollywood movies like The Matrix, Ex Machina, and 2001: A Space Odyssey for decades, AI has what experts call extremely high narratability. These sci-fi stories ultra-simplify incredibly complex technological hurdles. It is incredibly easy to sell investors on a narrative that humans are transitioning to not being the smartest things on Earth. And the danger here is super clear. These hyped-up narratives cause people to just write massive, blank checks for pure-play AI companies based purely on an imagined future, rather than current reality. It completely overshadows the fact that real enterprise software requires what they call the 5 nines, 99.999% reliability to be truly useful. And most alarmingly, this intense narrativity completely distracts investors from the sobering fact we mentioned earlier. 95% of companies currently report absolutely zero profit increases connected to their AI integrations. Which brings us to Section 4, Infrastructure Debt, the uncertainty pillar. This is really the climax of our financial analysis today. Back in the 1920s, everyone knew radio was amazing, but there was massive uncertainty about how to actually make money off of it. You broadcast a signal to many, but how do you know who's tuning in? They literally had to hold public contests to crowdsource ideas on how to monetize radio broadcasts. Today, AI is facing a very, very similar dilemma. The industry is desperately struggling to find profitable uses that transcend basic employee productivity, writing emails faster, to get to the big stuff like accelerating drug discovery or revolutionizing healthcare. Because here's the thing, to scale AI, you need an unimaginable amount of money, $5.2 trillion. According to McKinsey, that is the projected investment needed just for data centers by the year 2030. To put that completely mind-boggling figure into perspective for you, that is 15 times the cost of the entire Apollo space project. And that project included 17 different space missions. I honestly get a little dizzy just trying to wrap my head around numbers like that. Now compare that multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure projection against this. The entire AI industry is only expected to generate about $60 billion in revenue by 2025. The gap between the infrastructure cost and the actual revenue generation is just absolutely staggering. AI companies are in an all-out sprint against the clock to find new revenue streams before these astronomical bills come due. And how exactly are they paying for all these data centers right now? Debt. Massive, unprecedented amounts of private debt. Meta recently secured $72 billion in private debt to finance a gigantic data center in Louisiana. Oracle took on $18 billion in fresh debt just for AI infrastructure. This directly, almost perfectly mirrors the 1999 dot-com boom, where companies wildly racked up debt, racing to lay underground fiber optic cables. In fact, the UK's central bank, the Bank of England, has officially put out a severe warning about this increasingly debt-financed AI infrastructure, noting that AI stocks are currently valued at levels dangerously close to the absolute peak of the dot-com bubble. Now for Section 5, the novice investor, retail behavior. This naturally leads us to the final pillar of our evaluation, analyzing the uninformed money inflating this whole ecosystem. In 2024 alone, retail investors, just everyday people sitting at home, poured $30 billion into NVIDIA. That made it the most popular retail stock on the entire market. This is classic novice investor behavior. It's throwing money at a technology without really having a clue about the underlying infrastructure debt or those glaring corporate reliability issues we talked about. Historically, this huge influx of retail money is a glaring warning sign that precedes market bursts. But the authors of the bubble framework go even further than that. The truly sobering reality on Wall Street right now is that we are all novices. Nobody has done AI before. Even the big institutional investors don't know exactly how useful it's going to be in every application, how wildly expensive it will become over time, or what the ultimate most effective business model actually is. We are literally all flying blind here. Which brings us to our final section, Section 6, a fragile ecosystem house of cards. So let's recap. We now have a technology that is struggling with corporate reliability, sustained heavily by retail novices, and built on trillions of dollars of debt. This makes the entire house of cards incredibly vulnerable. And we actually just saw this vulnerability exposed with the DeepSeek shock. When news broke that the Chinese model DeepSeek achieved results similar to top-tier models like ChatGPT and Gemini, but using only a fraction of the computing power, AI stocks took an immediate, massive nosedive. Why? Because a breakthrough in efficiency like that proves that massive, debt-financed computing power might not be a permanent competitive moat after all. It could render all those newly built, incredibly expensive data centers obsolete practically overnight. So, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. We've officially checked all 4 boxes for a historical bubble: narrative, uncertainty, pure plays, and novices. Now, while AI undeniably brings a 10 to 25% uplift in corporate earnings when it's integrated correctly over years, the current market valuation is just far, far outpacing that reality. We really have to ask ourselves, is this trillion-dollar AI market just one technological breakthrough away from an infrastructure crash? Will this relentless race to build debt-financed data centers end up in the exact same graveyard as the dot-com fiber optic boom? Thank you so much for joining me for today's Explainer. Keep your eyes on the data, and I'll see you in the next one.